So on Thursday, I watched the first presidential debate. I'm a United States citizen, so of course I pay attention to that probably, or actually probably most people don't pay attention. Most people don't pay attention to politics. I don't even know if a majority of people vote in America, but I watched that, and it makes it more clear than ever that Biden being the president is probably some sort of elder abuse because he's probably very old and not entirely there, but that's not the biggest deal in the world in the grand scheme of things of how the government operates. So what probably happens is that when you elect your president, you're electing the guy that's going to appoint all the people in the different state departments to do the stuff of actually running the government. And then in those state departments, they have more people under the leader, the appointed leader of those departments, and then da, 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 da. So the president day to day probably doesn't actually do that much. Except for, I don't know, they probably, the appointees, they go up and tell him some stuff, and then maybe he makes a few decisions a day, kind of like a CEO in a company. The CEO in the company is just being told a bunch of data and trying to pay attention to the winds of the market and stuff in order to determine what decisions they should make per day and how to steer the big ass ship. So it's basically like that. But because the president doesn't actually do that much, then you can get by with the president basically being like a figurehead role where it's okay, this is the guy that goes to the press conferences. This is the guy that goes and talks to the international leaders and stuff and is the face of the US. So in that capacity, you look at Biden and you're like, oh, that's a really bad figurehead right now, because the rest of the countries look at that and they're like, oh, wow, this is a really old man that probably can't do much. Oh boy. But if they have any understanding of how our underlying government works, then they'd be like, oh yeah, there's people around him that are doing things, and we got to pay attention to that more so. That's why we always say the ex-president administration rather than saying ex-president did X. We probably do say that because most people don't know how government works, so it's probably one of those things where they're like, oh, Biden did this, and Biden did this as a proxy for Biden's administration did this, so the people under him. So you just have the politician there as the guy that takes all the arrows while your administration's actually the people doing stuff. So when you rate it that way, the only thing you should care about when you're determining who to vote for is, what did this administration do that I think is good for the country, and what did this other administration do that I think is good or bad for the country? And then you rate it on that. Most people aren't going to vote that way because most people aren't very informed voters, so they actually do it just on the celebrity contest game. If you're doing it based on the celebrity contest game, I think the majority of people are going to do that. Then if they watch that presidential debate or see any more public footage of Biden in the next how many months do we have? Next 4 months? Yeah, next 4 months. Then they're going to have a very difficult time wanting to vote for him because they're going to be like, oh, that's our president? Oh, shoot. We can't do that. So I suspect what'll probably happen is a lot of people just won't vote because they don't like the two options of the old man presidents. Generally, a lot of people don't vote anyway. But let me think. Last election, we had the most Americans vote than in any other election in history. So if that's the case, then we might have that happen again, to be honest, because, there will be emphasis on this being an existential election, and because it's an existential election, and this would be a both sides thing where it's every time Trump ever talks is always we won't have a country anymore if he becomes president. So there's some existential stuff on the right, and then the left is if Trump becomes president, then we're going to have another insurrection of January, similar to January 6th, and then Trump won't leave office, all of those sorts of things. There's the what is it called, Project 2025, that everyone's super concerned about, of effectively getting rid of the deep state, which would be interesting. By deep state, again, I just mean the unelected bureaucrats within the government. So again, the president becomes president, and then the president appoints people to his different departments. But You didn't vote on who those people are in the different departments. You voted on the president, and then by proxy, the president hopefully appoints the people that you want to be appointed. A great example is Lena Khan being the chairman of the FTC right now, and because she's chairman of the FTC is doing more stuff on antitrust laws, and they're trying to get rid of anti-compete clauses and all these other things. That wouldn't have happened if it weren't for this person, Lena Khan, being appointed to the FTC by Biden's administration. So, the presidency has an effect on what happens in the world, or what happens in the in your country, or how your country's regulated, and all those things. So it does matter, but this is how we're rating things. So I'm being very sober-minded about this. I'm not like being extreme about it at all, because to me it's like, I don't know, if you think it's an existential thing, and the president gets in and then society collapses because you got the wrong president, then it's like, okay, how much could you really do about it? Because it's like, okay, your vote is some fractional percentage of every vote in America, and we don't even do it by popular vote. So you have to think about it more like, okay, how much does my vote contribute to the electoral college system within my state? And then your vote seems like it matters even less, because most of the states aren't swing states. So if you're not in a swing state, then you effectively have no decision on it. So it's like, okay, and then so it's just like, you're just at the whims of whatever happens in the preceding events. So I don't know how much of a thing you can really have on it. What I would say is that, who's ever in office, it matters more to people at the lower class than it does people at higher classes, because, if you have the money to weather the storm, then it's not a big deal to you. Whereas if you don't, then who's ever president, it matters, because they might change regulations and stuff such that you have less benefits or some other thing. Or if the economy gets bad, then that affects you disproportionately compared to the rich person, and all those sorts of things. So then, yeah, your president really matters to you, but you still don't have a say in who the president becomes. If you're not in the swing state. So it's like, okay, what are you gonna do? And again, if you're working class, then you're spending most of your time working, so you're not really trying to stay up and at it on all the things happening politically. So yeah, how much can you prepare yourself to weather against good and bad situation, or to weather against the bad side of whatever happens? I truly don't know. So good luck to people. Yeah, my goal isn't to really convince anyone of anything, because I think that most people are set in their ways of whatever stance they have is the stance that they're gonna have. Because you have people at the extreme sides, they've planted their flags because they've already made a decision on who they want to be president, or what kind of government they want. They already have like a predisposition towards certain positions. And then there's people that are kind of like meandering in the gray area, and those people might be amenable to being convinced of either way. And if that's the case, then it kind of depends on what information they get first, to be honest, because it would be like, oh, that information sounds fairly informed, I'm going to go with that one. So, and then there are people that might be more discerning, so then they like actually try to sift through everything to make their decisions. That's very minority of the population. So yeah, you're basically at that front. So you don't really try to convince anyone of anything. It's just a matter of like people that are more amenable to the way that I think will listen to me and be like, oh, that guy thinks similar to me, so I'm going to be on board with him because he thinks similar to me. Or like the confirmation bias thing. Or you're going to have people that don't have, that are already in whatever stake, so they'll just get mad about whatever. And there are ways to get people out of extremist positions, but it's not going to happen in like a single YouTube video. That's not how these things work. The way that you get people out of extremist positions is become friends with them, basically. It's like, okay, and becoming friends with them isn't a matter of, oh, I'm going to shout at you and say that your thing is wrong, and because of that, then you're gonna get convinced. Then they won't become friends with you. So in order to become friends with you, you have to be like amenable to who they currently are, and then you're like, oh, okay, oh, you come at it from this perspective, and then from them being friends with you over time, they'll be like, oh, so people that think things like you think are bad people because they're friends with you. Because they're friends with you, they're like, oh, I see you as a human, and because I see the humanity in you, then I recognize that there are people that exist that can have viewpoints that aren't mine, that aren't evil people, because you, as their friend, they wouldn't categorize you as evil. So it's mostly human psychology when it comes to like quote unquote deconverting people. So if you want to get someone out of being a white supremacist, then if you're not white, then be their friend. So then they'll be like, oh wait, yeah, there are people that are not of my race that are cool people, and now I have to. Same thing with gay people, where it's like, most people that are anti-gay are people that have probably never met gay people in their lives, or don't know that they've met gay people in their lives, because some people aren't like super open about being out of the closet or anything like that. It's not like the most important thing to their identity being gay, so sometimes you don't even know. But yeah, I grew up in a place with a lot of different types of people, so just because of that, then it's like really easy to be like, oh, being a racial supremacist is the dumbest thing ever. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. So when you grow up in those kinds of environments, that changes how your outlook is. But if you grow up in a rural environment where everyone's mostly white, then obviously you could be more amenable to ethnocentric solutions, because you haven't been around people that aren't like you. So that's how that goes. I hold nothing against those people. I hold nothing against the positions that people came to as a result of whatever background they come from. Like, it just makes sense. Like, most people aren't going to sift through data point after data point to see whether or not the thing that they think is true. Most people live by what are the anecdotal experiences I've had in my personal life, and based on those anecdotal experiences, I've built up some sort of intuition for things that make my life better, and these intuitions have served me well in the past, so I'll continue to use those intuitions into the future. And then that's how that works. Most people are on what I call that NPC mode. I don't know. But autopilot, not NPC. But yeah, so that's how that goes. And you're only lucid for very few points in your life. Not lucid in the sense of like, most of the time you're running on autopilot, and then there are a few moments that you get where it actually forces you to reevaluate what you thought you knew, and then you go and you change that from there. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. I don't have large stake. I don't even know if I'm gonna vote, because again, it's back to what I said. If you're not in this swing state, then your vote doesn't really matter. So it's not really a big deal whether you vote or not. So yeah, that's basically where I'm at. I didn't even talk the specifics of like what would happen if you get one president versus the other president. I think I talked more about Biden stuff because I talked about the FTC. The Trump presidency, you're gonna get more tax cuts and maybe deregulation. It's hard to tell, because he'll talk about stuff like, oh, Green New Deal bad, but that's just because his base thinks Green New Deal bad. But if you're looking at the economics, it's that, green energy is getting cheaper and cheaper. It's actually Texas, of all places, that's implementing the most like wind power and solar farms and that sort of thing, because Texas has an independent grid from the rest of the US. So they have to be more self-sustaining, and with and they use the bad wind turbines that froze during that one year. I think it was 2020, 2021, one of those years. And yeah, so I don't know, like if you're going purely on the economics of it, then it's cheaper to use green. Green energy is becoming one of the cheapest energies. So economically, it'd make more sense to use that. So it's not entirely clear whether or not Trump's going to be actively anti-green. Like, he might. He wouldn't do policies that are actively pro-green. Like, he wouldn't do something like the Inflation Reduction Act, or he wouldn't sign something like that, like Biden did. And Biden also made infrastructure actually a thing by signing an infrastructure deal, that sort of thing. So he like did more significant legislation. You can have like a bad opinion on that because you could be like, oh, it just increases government spending, so then we're going to be more in debt and the deficit's going to be a big problem at some point. That's probably true, but also we did need to have our infrastructure made better. So, it's kind of two things there. And would Trump have signed any of that legislation? I kind of doubt it. But if Trump gets into the presidency, would he knock down that existing legislation? Kind of doubt it. So, it's one of those things. So it's a question of like, okay, in a Republican government, assuming it's how Republican governments normally work, which I think Trump's presidency was mostly probably how Republican governments normally work. I'm 23. I don't have a good sense of what the two parties actually are like. So, but if it's something like, oh, you cut your taxes, as in he keeps the taxes, whatever the current tax thing is, that is lower for your income taxes. So he does that. And then, or he lowers it even further. He either maintains the current taxing system or he makes it lower. One of those. And then he regulates less. If he regulates less and the existing infrastructure bills and CHIPS Act, all that stuff already exist, then what probably happens is companies do what they were already gonna do with those bills in mind. And then we still end up with the infrastructure being built and the chips being built and the green energy rollout. Even though from a rhetorical standpoint, he's like, oh, I'm against these things. I'm against your electric cars and all that sort of stuff. They're still going to happen just because of the market forces. Because if he doesn't put his foot on the lever, then that means that the companies are going to do what they were already going to do. And the economically viable thing to do is the green stuff and the electric cars and all that stuff. So they'll just continue doing that anyway. And I don't think he'd put his foot on the scale to like actively ban those things because that wouldn't be free market. So he could do no legislation in his whole 4 years and we'd probably still directionally be going in a good direction. It is kind of what I would think. Now maybe I'm wrong. And then, if the Biden presidency continues, then there'd be more government of like actively pushing on the scale to allow for more green energy, more chips and all that sort of stuff. So it's a question of like how much does the government actually push on those sorts of things. That's kind of my general sense of it. As far as like how that makes people feel from having your figurehead be Biden versus Trump and like people get more polarized and all that sort of thing. That's a different question that I don't know. That's the social stuff is kind of a whole another pot of worms. But as far as policy goes, it's kind of what I think. You could be worried about things like if Trump goes into presidency with foreign policy, where he'd be like, oh, if he pulls us out of NATO, that's probably not good. So yeah, I don't know. So I don't have a good sense of what direction these things go. But I'm not super. These things don't stress me out day to day. It's just a thing. It's like, okay, this guy's president now. Okay, let's see whether or not things blow up or not, and then you go from there. And if they don't blow up, then you're like, okay, next 4 years, who's the next president? You keep going. I don't know. Focus on your personal life and see how much the presidency affects your personal life, and then go from there. That's kind of what I think. Also look at your local government because that probably affects you way more than your federal government, or at least you have more decision than what happens than the federal government stuff. So yeah, like if you like, dislike if you dislike, leave a comment letting me know why you like or dislike. If you think I'm stupid, definitely comment that. That's really important. I gotta have a barometer for how stupid I am politically. But yeah, that's where we're at. I guess getting rid of the freaking deep state under like Project 2025, that could be a problem. I don't know. I'm not existentially worried about either of the presidents becoming president. So, that's just how I am. But anyway, bye.